who are your top 3 best coaches out there representing and producing winners in judo?
You're talking about current, right? Current coaches.
Correct, yes.
Not past coaches. Okay. So current coaches, I mean, an obvious name would be Driton Kuka from Kosovo. Very obvious from the results that he's produced. In the course of 2 Olympics, he's produced 3 Olympic champions. And, Kosovo is a tiny country, war-torn country that has very little resources. And he's managed to produce 3 Olympic gold medalists. And I remember after Nora Jakova and Dristya Krasniki won Olympic gold medals, apparently Yasuhiro Yamashita, the great Yasuhiro Yamashita from Japan, said, Japan has a new rival and it's Kosovo. Wow. I'm not sure if that's true, but I read somewhere that he said that. I won't be surprised if he said that, and so it's remarkable, to be able to produce 2 Olympic gold medalists from the same, basically essentially the same dojo,
right?
But they all operated out of his dojo, which is the Ippon Judo Club. Now, with the success of these 3 Olympic champions and his success, apparently in Kosovo there's a national judo training center. They've built, obviously when you have success, money pours in and there's resources, and so they've been able to build a national training center in Kosovo. But before that, all these champions came out of his dojo,
right?
And so it's not like Kosovo has a lot of judokas. Yes, now a lot of people play judo because of the success that they've had, and it's attracted a lot of people. But in terms of very high level judokas, at the time of Kelmendi, there weren't a lot of high level judokas. Right. At the time, there were only this small handful of top level judokas from his judo club, and he's managed to produce remarkable results, with that small group of people.
Right, and it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead, continue.
Yeah. So that's one, Kuka, and not sure if you want to ask any follow-up questions about that.
Yeah. No, it's interesting too, because I think he obviously himself was a former competitor, right?
Yes.
And there's a whole backstory to that, and the IGF produces some really cool videos and that tell those stories, and I think fans can always appreciate that. But I believe it's fair to say that judo's become Kosovo's national or international sport, right? If you look at
not surprisingly. Yeah, we've seen that happen a lot in other countries in the past. When a champion, a hero emerges in that small country.
Like Slovenia would be similar to
Slovenia. You could say Israel is another place,
yes.
And Mongolia as well.
Right.
Where they have a champion, and then suddenly the sport becomes very popular. Mm-hmm. It happened too with goes back quite a way, but Peter Seisenbacher from Austria.
Right.
Unfortunately, he's a little bit of a disgraced personality, because he had some sexual abuse allegations, and he's in jail now apparently. But he was a double Olympic champion, and and Austria's judo hero. And judo was not that popular in Austria until he came along and won an Olympic gold.
Right.
And then he subsequently got 2 Olympic golds, and judo became this popular sport, and judo clubs mushroomed all over the country because they had this hero.
Right.
Yeah, and so you do see that happening, and certainly in Kosovo, judo is the sport.
Right. It's interesting because I think it goes back to earlier in the conversation. We're talking about how this sport is global, and every region, almost every country that's represented, once they have established that quote unquote that achievement of having someone make the podium, you begin to see how it impacts the country's overall performance. More kids start to train in judo, and then they continuity, they become winners themselves. So who else would you say?
Okay, another obvious one would be Shany Hershko from Israel. Israel's female team coach, head coach, and his first major success was with Yarden Gerbi who won a world title in 2013, using a very unusual choke, now famously known as the Gerby choke.
Yeah.
Yeah, are you familiar with that?
I am.
That choke?
I believe. Is it not similar to what we know?
It's the Peruvian necktie.
Yeah. I was gonna say in Nogi and
yeah, it's a Peruvian necktie, and so it was legal at the time. It wasn't illegal. Let's put it this way. And she did it, and she won it with style, and so that was his first major success. And now he's had a lot of successes, producing medalists in the female team. And again, Israel is a small country, but judo has become a very popular sport there. And they have this one central place called Wingate Institute, where all the national players are concentrated and they train together. And he's developed a system that works. They're producing champions, and small country. And he's famous for saying, you might have seen this IJF produced clip where they interview a few different coaches, and he's famous for saying that we're a small country, we don't have the resources of Japan, we can't train like the Japanese, we cannot try to emulate the Japanese, we have to do our own way, because we are different conditions than in Japan. And it's true. I mean, Jimmy Pedro says the same thing. I think one of the mistakes that many coaches and maybe many clubs in many countries make is that they look at Japan and they say, well, Japan's obviously a great judo nation, let's do everything they do and let's try to be like them. But you're not like Japan, right? You go, a Japanese top level club will have 50 black belts on the mat. You don't have those kind of bodies available, capable bodies. It's a different condition. I mean, in most judo clubs, you struggle to have 3 capable bodies to do randori with, so you have to find your own way. And Shany Hershko has obviously developed his own way to develop these Israeli female players, and he's had the success that to prove that his system works.
If I can ask just a follow-up question on that, obviously Israeli judo is very, very dynamic, very entertaining. There's always big throws, there's always action and a lot of passion, which is a win-win across the board. How, in terms of what's the subtle difference or differences, would you say, if you were to compare what you've seen coming out of Kosovo vis-a-vis what's come out of Israel stylistically? How would you compare the both, if I can put you on the spot and ask?
Okay, well, I think first of all, Kosovo and Israel, they're actually the judo teams, they're actually quite close, and the Israeli team has helped the Kosovans a lot. They help Garmamie a lot. They help, and a lot of the Kosovans, when they go to Israel for training and rehabilitation and things like that. I think when Garmamie was injured, she got a lot of rehabilitation in Israel. So they work quite closely, and I think there's a certain recognition that, hey, look, we're both two small countries. Two small countries with big judo programs and so on. I think so when you see the difference, I think that both are probably not overly wedded to this Japanese system. They're not whereas in many places around the world, there's that legacy of the Japanese system, and they try to follow the Japanese system, and that's not the case in Kosovo and Israel. Judo is a sport, and for them is very practical, and it's about what works. I think one major difference is that Israel has success with both men and women. Kosovo is mainly the women. They've got one male player, Akil Jakova, who's really good. But
I think you've written about him, right?
Yes. But they don't really have that many successful male players, whereas Israel has a lot of fantastic male players who can really throw, right? Like you said, really dynamic, right? Shmailov, Tal Flicker, all those guys can throw big, and so I guess also in terms of the not only depth but breadth Israel now, although it's a small country, has breadth in judo. They have, they have top players in almost every category. They've got good players in almost every category. Right. Kosovo is much more, just a few selected players in a few selected categories. Growing, of course, and it'll probably change in the next 5-10 years. But Israel is definitely right now has more breadth.
Right. If I can follow up in terms of the coaches, and I don't know how much interaction you've had with them, or if you've interviewed them much. How stylistically, how would you compare, these two coaches from Kosovo and from Israel? If I know it's a tough one to answer there.
Yeah, I can't claim to know them very well. I mean, in fact, Driton Kuka, I've only interviewed him, and I don't really, I've not interacted much with him. Shany Hershko, I kind of know. Can't say I know him well, but I kind of know because actually, interestingly, he's a fan of my work, Judo Crazy, and so
I'm not surprised, man. I think a lot of I'm a fan. I think a lot of people are. So it's awesome content. Sorry, continue.
So I've interacted with him a little bit more, and asked it, and I think so a lot of what I'm going to tell you is based on perception rather than intimate personal knowledge. I can't claim to know them well or beyond just interviewing and talking to them. But from what I know, talking to them and also talking to players, is that Driton Kuka is a he's a hard ass coach. Really strict. For a long time, the girls were not allowed to have social media accounts. So they were like, no social media, no Facebook, no Instagram. They were very strict. Similar to the.
It's sorry to interrupt, but it's good for to disconnect from social media, as many people have said. That there's unfortunately, it's not the most positive space in terms of one's mental health as well.
He's produced results. So in terms of his effectiveness as a coach, there's no questioning that. Right. But he's just very strict in that sense,
Sure.
And so similar to the Slovenian coach. The Slovenian coach is exactly the same way. And
I think I'm frozen.
Yeah, frozen. But, all right, can you hear me? Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
So he's a hard ass, strict disciplinarian. If when you watch movies and you see this hard ass drill sergeant, in the Marines, he's something like that. He's a hard ass guy, strict. I think Shany, my perception is that he's not such a hard ass coach. I compared to all the girls have social media accounts and they're active on social media and things like that. So it's not like no social media, and sort of like he just the Kosovan coach is a lot more in controlling of his players. I say the approach is more of a controlling type than let's say the Israeli, which I think that it's a more Western approach, if I can use that. More Western sporting approach than the hardcore authoritarian type of approach.
Right.
But there's no denying that both of them produce results.
Right.
Both of them produce results. It may be different methodologies, but they produce results.
For you personally, I'm going to ask you for a third coach, but in general, because you yourself are a coach, of course, right?
Yes.
What's your approach to coaching, if I can ask?
Okay, I'm very sports oriented, so I don't care about tradition too much. Of course, we use Japanese terms, we bow, we follow the basic etiquette of judo, but basically, I approach judo the way that perhaps a wrestling coach would approach training. And to me, it's a sport. How do we achieve the results? So I just to give you an example, this may be a little bit controversial, but you know what is uchikomi, right?
Right.
Have you repetitive drills, right? Yeah. Like for example, I do use uchikomi when a player is first learning a technique. But once they've learned the technique, once they've understood how to enter into the technique, I don't do uchikomi anymore. But
what? You don't.
So yeah,
I'm
so
sure. Sorry, I'm sure right now some people are unfollowing your page. No,
yeah,
kidding.
no, but that's heresy in many
Of course.
Japanese clubs,
Right.
Japanese oriented clubs. They'll do uchikomi for an hour, and
Right.
so for me it's just like, uchikomi is useful for learning the entry into the technique, but once you've learned the technique, it's kind of useless. So we do other drills. We do situational drills. We do a lot of randori sparring. We do a lot of
Okay.
nagikomi, actual throws and things like that. So I don't follow tradition for the sake of tradition. Neither do I discard tradition. I mean, if there's
Sure.
a traditional technique or a traditional approach that works, it actually works, then we'll do it. I'm not anti-traditional or anti-classical, but if it doesn't work, then we'll do something that works.
Right.
So my approach is very sports oriented. It's not I don't care about whether something is traditional or not. I
Right.
care about whether something works or not.
Wouldn't
So
it
that's
be?
my approach.
I appreciate that. I think I know where you're coming from with that. Wouldn't it be fair to say that there's so many different communities or different sort of outlooks on this approach? Like for some folks are just recreationalists. They you know what I mean. They enjoy the traditional aspect
Yeah.
and they might see the value of the sports side, of course. But for them, they're more focused on the tradition, the proper technique and the kata
Yeah.
and all that.
I mean, some people like kata. Yeah, exactly. So it depends what you're doing judo for. For
Right.
some people it's just exercise, recreation. For some people it's even a social thing, coming to the
Right.
club and meeting friends.
Right.
And that's very different from somebody who wants to win a gold medal in a national championships.
Sure.
So when I gave you that answer, I was talking in response to training my competitors.
Right.
I also have recreational players, and my approach is very it's quite different there. It's
Right.
quite different there.
Right.
Yeah, but when I answered your question, it was in regard to how I train competitors.
Right.
Okay, so you wanted me to name 3 coaches. The third one is a coach who I don't know personally. I've never interviewed, but I've observed from afar. Is Keiji Suzuki, who's just been appointed to replace Kosei Inoue as the men's national coach.
Right.
And of course, my observations of him is more of him as an athlete, and he was a superb athlete. I mean, he was a superb athlete, and based on what I've seen him say about his approach to coaching, where he's when he was appointed, he said that he's not going to try to mold the players in a certain way, but to look at their own personal characteristics and try to help them blossom. So I think that's a very positive thing. That's a very it's not a top-down authoritarian approach. It's like you must do it my way. It's more of it's very open, and I think that that's good. And also, I think he's seen the success that Inoue has had with the men's team. And he certainly doesn't want to disappoint, and he wants to at least live up to that, right? At least get 5 gold medals. At least if not more. So I don't think he's going to mess too much around with the formula. What I'm sure he's seen what Inoue has put in place, and what the players are used to. I don't think he's going to mess too much with it. He might tweak the formula a little bit and put his own little spin on it, but he's not going to completely upend everything and risk it all. I think you don't mess with success.
Right.
And the fact that he is a former champion and a great one at that, fantastic athlete. He was rather small for a heavyweight, but fantastic footwork, great uchimata, great athlete. And that helps a lot because he's been there himself. He's been a double world champion. He's been an Olympic champion. He knows what it takes, So I think that's always a positive thing. So it'll be interesting to watch what he does with the Japanese men's team and the success that he'll have in the coming years.
Right. One last follow-up questions with that, and then I guess we will end it there. How much pressure is on him to produce more gold medals?
I think tremendous pressure, right? Yeah, tremendous pressure because just because of the high benchmark that Inoue has set. I mean, Inoue set out to achieve great things, and he did it.
Right.
And of course they were contemporaries, right? As competitors, they competed at the same time.
Right.
And sometimes and in the All Japan Championships, he's beaten Inoue. Inoue's beaten him, and so they were rivals and they were competitors and they were teammates. But when Inoue was in his prime, Inoue got the minus 100 kilo slot, which was actually the slot that was more suitable for Suzuki than I mean, Suzuki, I'm sure, would have preferred minus 100 than plus 100 because he's not a very big player. But Inoue was the more dominant player at the time, so he moved up to the heavyweight slot, and and so in a way he was. I mean, I won't say he was second fiddle to Inoue, but Inoue got the prime slot, which was the minus 100. I'm sure both of them wanted that slot, but Inoue got that slot because Inoue was more dominant, more successful, and so he had to take the heavyweight slot, and so there was that rivalry. So I'm sure he wants to outdo Inoue,
right,
as a coach, or at least match, but if not outdo Inoue,
Right.
So I think tremendous pressure on him, but he's got a great team to work with. I mean, you've got fantastic players, right? They're really good at, especially in the lightweights, right? The lightweight categories, the Japanese are unassailable, but heavyweights is a little bit of a challenge. We've spoken about that, a little bit of a challenge. The Europeans and the rest of the world can give the Japanese a good fight in the heavier weight categories. In the lightweight categories, the Japanese really dominate, but in the heavier weights, he's got some work to do.